on us for a violent crime in progress. When they pounded on our door, we opened and they barged in. The neighbor reported hearing people yelling things like, "Shut up you little hunt, I'm going to grape your ducking 12-year-olders," along with a girl screaming profanity. When the cops saw it was 3 guys and a girl drinking and playing Halo, the one just looks at the others in sheer disbelief. The cop starts to tell us they were called in for a grape in progress and tell us how we need to be more careful and whatnot because it could have ended badly. During this time my friend is still on the headset and the other guys we were playing with are wondering what the hell is going on and are hassling him, and then my friend says with the cop in the room, "We were apparently raping you duckers so badly somebody had to call the cops and the cops just can't hold it in and start cracking up. They did give us a noise warning but no citations." My brother was a cop who worked nights in Minneapolis. One snowy night near the UOFR campus he noticed a car weaving. So he pulled them over thinking there would be alcohol involved. Nope, it was a car full of deaf people having an argument which included the driver. He just told the driver to not sign and drive. That for sure is a real thing and scary as shit. I have hearing impaired friends that are horrible drivers and of course they leave the dome light on in the car to be able to communicate at night, which doesn't help the cause. I mean, I understand it must be boring driving and not being able to listen to music. But shit, that's so scary when they try signing with someone in the backseat. My brother was once jumping his bike off the end of the public boat dock behind the city hall, which also housed our police station. They had it tethered so it wouldn't get lost on the bottom. A cop came out, watched for a while and said, "I'm fairly certain something about that is illegal. But I can't figure out what and it looks like fun. So be safe," and walked back inside. A few years ago a friend and I were walking home through a residential estate. Drunk. After a night out. About halfway home a police car pulls up next to us and says they need to talk to us. They say that CCTV in the area had observed us entering several front gardens. We then drunkenly explained that we had been going into people's gardens and swapping around flower pots, hanging baskets and garden ornaments with their next door neighbors. One of the cops was laughing a lot and the other seemed really confused. Luckily they got another call and let us carry on our way. My friend had a bunch of prop arms and legs in his car, you know. College. He and his other friend were trespassing in the Northfield tunnels. Google it. And when they get back to the car there is a cop waiting. He asks to see in the trunk so they open it. He jumps back a sec, but quickly realizes their arms and legs are fake and he hasn't caught some serial killers. Then gives them a very stern "shut the duck up" look as he calls his partner from the car to come look at this, all shaky voiced, as he tells my friend and his friend to put their hands up. Hella serious. The other cop comes over, looks in the trunk and freaks the duck out, screams, and runs away back to the car. At which point the first cop bursts out laughing and tells my friends he was in Vietnam. And does a "get out of here" gesture and sends them on their way. So basically he used my friend to pull a super cruel practical joke on his partner. It wasn't illegal, but really suspicious. I was a cop in the Air Force. We had just gone into a higher FPCON threat level, and around 11 o'clock at night I saw 3 people in an empty dark field near some power lines with shovels and a garden hoe. My partner and I decided to stop them and see what was going on, because it didn't look like civil engineering or anyone that should be there at that hour. So we go up, see that they're all about 14-15 years old and they're all sweating and out of breath. We ask what they are digging for, and they say they weren't digging. Which after looking around we didn't see any dug up dirt. So my partner asks what they are doing, and they hesitantly answer that they were LARPing. One of their dads shows up and scolds them, telling them how shady they look, apologizes to us, and we send them all back to the dad's house, which was about 100 yards away. I hold back my laughter until I get back to the car, where I have to explain to my partner what LARPing is and why I'm laughing. I didn't catch them, but when I arrived at my first station, after graduating from the academy, I was talking to some of the guys who had been there a while. I asked if they knew my cousin, who lived in that patrol area. Turns out they did. They had a call a few years back of some kids driving around, pulling up next to cars at traffic lights and waving a huge dildo at the drivers, laughing hysterically, then driving off. They were pulled over, brought down to the station, and parents were notified. There was one old timer who was a bit of big dig, telling me that my cousin was a pervert, as were his friends. But the other guys said they thought it was hilarious when it happened, and they never charged the kids with anything. I still mess with my cousin about that when I see him. Not a cop, but I have a radio scanner. Dispatcher, reports of a teenager riding a skateboard naked down Westway. Cop, is the suspect carrying a suspicious package? I had a cop search my backpack once and found a couple of beers and a box of condoms. I was with my friends at the time, so he was like, why are there 3 beers, a box of condoms and 2 dudes? I was speechless. I'm not a cop, but I have a story where I made a cop laugh. It was after I got arrested for stealing alcohol from Target, and I was handcuffed to a rail on the wall of this room while I was waiting to be processed. The cop was just passing through and asked the guy being detained across from me what he did. The other guy, who was around my age, said he was there for retail theft, but he stole a bunch of jeans. Then he turned to me and asked the same question. After I told him I was there for stealing alcohol, he looked down at my shoes, which were a pair of really beat up Chucks, started laughing and said, "Man, you should have tried to steal a new pair of shoes, because those are ducked up." I couldn't help but laugh myself, and he kept laughing to himself as he left the room. Not a police officer, but this story is going to fit. I was 17. Just got my learner's permit, which allowed me to drive alone but not after midnight or before 6 AM. NJ older rules, and a bunch of friends. I went to Applebee's. I had a couple of airsoft guns in the trunk, about 3,000 plastic BBs, and we all decided it was a good idea to chase each other around in the parking lot with the guns. Stupidly, I took off the yellow tips. Waitress inside sees us, calls the cops. Cops show up, arrest us and ask us to sit on the curb. After about 7 minutes of seriousness, they take the gums and BBs, dump them in my trunk and backseat, laugh and leave after breaking the airsoft gums. They told us not to play with these in public parking lots and not to remove the orange yellow tips. Those guys took our beers too. Now that I think about it, we could have been held. Not a police officer, but did loss prevention. Watched a girl of about 13 steal a pregnancy test, go into the bathroom. She came out about 10 minutes later bawling her eyes out, sprinting out of the store. I could have stopped her for shoplifting, but couldn't stop laughing and thinking this girl's life is ruined. I shouldn't make it worse. My dad always tells this story from when he was young and stupid in the 70s. Now he's old and stupid. Anyway, one of their friends is hanging out the sunroof while they're driving down the freeway. Naturally, they get pulled over. The cop comes to the window and says, "I don't know what, but I'm going to find something to ticket you for." He goes back to his cruiser and flips through his handbook for about 20-30 minutes. He finally comes back with this huge grin on his face and says, "You over-exceeded the limits of your vehicle, here's your ticket." I'm not a police officer, very sorry. But to kids at my school, one of them was a friend's brother. Actually, got drunk last year and climbed a 100+ foot crane, all the way to the top. Best part? The crane was directly across the street from the police station. They were noticed right away and arrested the second they came down. Not me, but my uncle. He's a pretty young guy, 35? Something like that, and definitely even younger at heart, so he always tends to handle things in a pretty relaxed way. This was last year, right after high school graduation. About 50 or so of the grads decided to celebrate by buying animal-themed Onesies and parade around town in them. It got to be about 8 PM and everyone was obviously pretty tired, so they decided to take a rest outside of this shopping center around 15 minutes from my house. One of the store owners didn't like this too much, so he called 911 saying some kids were loitering outside of his store. This obviously isn't an emergency by most standards, so my uncle was the closest officer to the scene, so he was the only one who showed up. He thought it was the funniest thing of them to do, so he took a selfie with some of them, gave them a warning, and just told them to head out. When I was a teen, living in the Phoenix area, we would fill up the back of a pickup with shaved ice from behind the ice rink and then build snowmen in people's yards. We would do it at night before ringing and driving away. One time, a neighbor called the cops after hearing a group of teens sneaking around outside. The cop came by and found out what we were doing. Instead of getting after us, he told us to follow him somewhere. We ended up making a snowman in his own front yard. He rang the doorbell and hid around the corner while his wife came to the door, and then his kids came out. There are some good cops out there. Not all of them are like the ones shooting people without cause. Local PD SWAT team came and played airsoft with my team to help us practice. We got demolished every time against them, but they taught us tactics that helped us own our local field against other teams. Dispatched to suspicious activity. Car parked on a residential street at night, cold as hell outside and rainy. Not sure what was suspicious, but complainant didn't want to be contacts. I find the car and pull up behind. The same time a second unit pulls up in front and we light them up. HMN. Don't see anybody in the car. Look around to make sure somebody isn't coming up on us. Nope. I look in backseat and see blankets moving. What the? Bang on window and finally a head pops up. Teen kid who didn't look to have a stitch on. Okie doke, by yourself naked in a car. Then hear a voice. Oh. Someone else. He says yes, he and his girlfriend were having fun. Yes. They are both naked. Well. No biggie. About them. She opens the door and bolts. Buck naked running between houses. We don't know if she has warrants. Or what. But no, she'll freeze to death pretty quick. I ask why she ran as other squad gives chase. But kid is as surprised as we were. This girl is a ref and track star. We get 2 other squads involved and after 20 minutes find her. Near frozen. In a storage shed. The reason she ran? She recognized my voice and knew me from church. The pastor's daughter. Nice. We told her she was stupid. Could have died. Got 4 squads involved. Etc. I never said a word to the other officers about who she was and never mentioned it after to her. Just smiled when I saw her every Sunday. I got pissed drunk with a hot girl I was trying to sleep with, 18 or 19 at the time, and after she politely declined, suggested I go home. Being drunk as a skunk, but still having some wits about me, I took my longboard out of my car, left my car keys in her house, and began skating home. This is about 2:30 AM. I'm making my way through a shopping center parking lot when out of nowhere, I get a cop searchlight in my face and proceed to wreck hard. Like landed on my hands, knees, and face simultaneously and not being able to pop back up. Cop comes up to me stifling his laughter and gives me a once over. He knows I'm underage and drunk. I know he knows I'm underage and drunk. He asks to see my ID. Asks if I have a car. Yes sir. It's at this girl's house. I can only assume he decided to not duck me over because I was smart enough to leg it instead of driving drunk, and gave me a ride home instead. I can only imagine what it looked like to him though. A drunken teenager attempting to longboard home and then completely wrecking face at 2:30 in the morning. I'm sure the boys at the station got a good laugh at my expense. We were doing laps around a pond with a rope tied to my Jeep and another person wakeboarding behind holding onto the rope. The police officer pulled up on the nearest road, flashed his lights and motioned for us to come over to him. When we got there he just said, "That looks like a hell of a good time, but I'm getting tired of dispatch getting calls about y'all. Sorry guys. Save up some money and buy a boat." I had a roommate in college that loved to tell this story. He drove a Jeep and having a Jeep he loved messing around with it in snow. So one day he is driving down the highway during a snowstorm when he notices this building with a small parking lot off the highway. So he pulls in and proceeds to do donuts around this empty parking lot in the fresh snow. He then gets back on the highway. Not 30 seconds later he has blue lights flashing behind him. The cop comes up to his window and tells him, "Sir, if you're going to do donuts, please make sure you don't do them in the parking lot of the state police barracks." Sure enough, he looks back and there is a bunch of cops standing out behind the building laughing at him. So, a girl and I were getting a little frisky in the backseat of my car. She was about to start giving me head when we see a flashlight shine through the window. We flip out and climb back to the front seat. The cop asked for my ID and whatnot. When he came back from his car he asked, "So, did you see me drive up?" I replied with, "No. I saw your flashlight and freaked out." He then said, "Oh, so we both had a no duck moment. I wasn't expecting anything, then I looked in and was just like shit." Then he proceeded to tell me one of my tires was low on air and gave me a list of good places to go have sex in a car. Haha, funniest experience ever. The scariest part is that the girl I was with's dad is a cop. And those two cops were part of his squad. She told me at their Christmas that cop told a story to her mom and they both thought it was hilarious. Responded to a call about a suspicious vehicle. It was in an area where a neighborhood was supposed to be built, but they ended up canceling it, so now there's just roads there. When I arrived I noticed a car sitting on one of the back roads, but it was empty. I and another officer drove down a path that goes into the woods that was behind where the car was. I noticed something moving in the woods, so we got out of our cars and looked. Turns out some teenagers bought one of those inflatable dinosaur costumes and were filming their own version of Jurassic Park. They were super nice kids. I called the owner of the land and explained the situation. He was totally fine with it, and the other officer and I sat and watched them for a little. Just told them to not stay out there after dark. Usually crackheads will go out there and get high at night time. I got the kid's YouTube channel name. Hopefully he'll post it soon so I can watch it.